Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Peace Islands New York event. If you're here for the first time, please subscribe to our channel and, of course, like this video. You'll have the opportunity after this event, of course, to visit our other events. While you're here, of course, please look at the description of this event today. There's more details there. And I'd like to welcome, of course, our speaker today. Welcome, David. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Now, if I may introduce the topic today, it's titled after the most recent book by David, In Search of Braver Angels, Getting Along Together in Troubled Times. Just by way of background, David Blankenhorn is the president of Braver Angels, a citizens organization working for less rancor and goodwill in politics and society. Before co-founding Braver Angels, David led the Institute for American Values, a think tank on civil society he founded in 1988. He also founded the Mississippi Community Service Corps and the Virginia Community Service Corps, and co-founded the National Fatherhood Initiative. He's the author of 5 books, most recently the one I've just mentioned, In Search of Braver Angels. David grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, graduated from Harvard, and has a MA in history from the University of Warwick in England. He lives in New York City. There's also a link to his book, In Search of Braver Angels, in the description below below this video that you're watching today. Again, welcome, David. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. Please elaborate, what type of Braver Angels are you after, or does America need?
Yeah. Well, first, let me thank you for the invitation to be on the program, and thank you for your hospitality and explaining to me a little bit about the mission of Peace Islands and the wonderful work you're doing. I'm very grateful and feel a kinship with your mission, and I'm sure many of the folks who are listening. I'll tell you how Braver Angels got started. We, in the election of 2016, I'm sure you remember how angry and scared and upset people were over that election when Donald Trump was running against Hillary Clinton. The level of rancor, ugly language, half of the country not liking the other half, was very high. I think it's higher now than it even was then, but it was high then. So 2 days after the 2016 election, I called a friend and colleague of mine, David Lapp, who lives in South Lebanon, Ohio, in Southwest Ohio. His county went 60% for Trump. I live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, where nearly everybody voted for Hillary Clinton. And so we were comparing notes about people were feeling pretty good that day in Southwest Ohio, and people in my neighborhood acted like, they'd been shot. I mean, just horror. How could this have possibly happened to our country? And we had gone through this long campaign with millions of dollars being spent in advertisements and everything. But we realized that these two halves of America were talking at each other, but really never with each other. There was just this unusual sense of intense dislike and mistrust of the other side, but without much knowledge of them or really any connection with them on a personal level. So we decided 10 days after the election that we would pull together 10 people from South Lebanon who had voted for Donald Trump and 10 people who had voted for Hillary Clinton, and we would bring them together over the course of a weekend for about 10 hours of conversation, where we would actually try to listen to one another. And we brought in colleague, Professor William Doherty from the University of Minnesota, who helped designed the program and helped to moderate it. And I'll tell you, Imre, it was a transformative experience. I mean, there are people who were there who are still part of Braver Angels. And, we just felt like something really important had happened, because people who were feeling so angry and so mistrustful and so pessimistic about the country are frightened left feeling better. They just felt better, and they felt more, I don't know, just had a better feeling about the possibilities of the country. And so we only wanted to do this one time to see what would happen. It was an experiment. But since this one worked out well, we decided we'd do it again. So we did another one a few weeks later in a different part of Ohio, same result. People just felt they wanted more. It makes you feel better when you go into a relationship with someone who you don't think you're going to like, who you think is maybe a bad person, who has bad motives or can't be trusted. And you leave a conversation feeling like you could actually recognize the common humanity. Even if you disagree, you still, the level of animosity goes down, and people feel better about this and they want more of it. So that was the beginning of Braver Angels. That summer of 2017, we rented a bus and we just drove around the country for 2 months, having these workshops. And we did about 50 of them in about 15 different states. And it was fun, and we loved driving around the country in a bus, and we learned a lot. We met a lot of people, and all of these things were organized by local volunteers who had heard about this and wanted to get involved. I mean, we had no money, we had no paid people. We just did this and realized that a lot of people really, they wanted to be involved in something like this. They were heartsick about the state of things in the country. They wanted to be involved. And so now, if you go to today, we have 87 chapters around the country. We have about 50,000 people on our subscriber list, and we have about 11,700 dues paying members. You can join for $12 a year. And so we have about 11,700 members. We have people in all 50 states. We have about 2,400 people who are volunteering every week to do the work. They run the workshops, they organize the events, they hold the meetings, the chapter meetings. And so it's a national organization now. And I think it's fair to say that we are the largest and fastest growing group in America, bringing together conservatives and liberals on equal terms to clarify disagreements, to look for common ground where it exists, and to try to work together for the common good of the country going forward. And I'm the president of the organization, and it's the best experience I've had in my life to do this work. I'll mention several aspects or some principles that I think are important, and it may be, I think it's been a key to our success, and it may be interesting for your listeners to reflect upon this, because I know many people who work with you and who know this program are involved in their own communities as leaders and doing things. So one principle is that when it comes to political disagreements, we are concerned not with so much with disagreeing on issues, like I have an opinion on healthcare, you have an opinion on healthcare, we don't agree. We are more concerned with what the academics call affective polarization, which concerns my feelings about you, how I think of you as a person, affective, having to do with feelings. So, and that is the problem in the United States today. It's not really so much that we disagree about issues, but that we just don't like each other. We don't trust each other. So if I disagree with you about an issue, I'm going to say something like, well, you know, you support the wall on the southern border and I don't, and we disagree on that issue. But what's happening more and more is I'm saying not only do I disagree about this issue with you, I think you're a bad person. I think you're working with bad motives. I think you're a danger. You and people like you are a danger to the country. I don't trust you. I would not want to cooperate. I would not want my child to date your son or daughter. I mean, it's that level of animosity. And now I'm sure you, Imre, you're familiar with societies where this kind of animosity occurs. It's yes, there are differences on issues, but it digs deeper. It digs into your heart. It digs into your soul, where it becomes almost a kind of hatred that's rooted in pain and anger and mistrust. So our program is focused on that. We don't want to change people's opinions about political issues. We want to change their opinions about each other as citizens, as members of a common humanity. We want people to see the humanity in the other side, even as they continue to disagree about political issues. So we would have a common thing for us would be we would have half of the room people who are, the conservative, they're strong supporters of President Trump and now strong supporters of the sort of Trump movement on the conservative side of things. The other people, half would be progressive, in strong disagreement with the conservatives on almost everything. So there's this, and they don't trust each other at all. And they, generally speaking, don't know each other. I'm not sure if this is true in how many other countries this is true, but one of the reasons we don't trust each other so much today is we don't really have any contact with one another. We don't rub shoulders with people every day that are different from us politically. 60 years ago in the United States, most Americans lived in counties where the vote for president was fairly close. So that meant that if they went to the store or they drove to work or if they went to church or synagogue or mosque, they were in the same room with people who voted for the other party. That's increasingly rare today, both residentially and in terms of religious life and in other spheres. We're more segregated. We generally speaking tend to associate with people who are like us politically. There are many studies that show this to be true. So one of the reasons for this lack of trust is that we literally don't know each other. We have a stereotyped view that we get from the media or we get from somewhere, but it's not through personal relationships. It's through other things. So one of the core idea for us is we put people who disagree face to face on equal terms. And rather than argue with each other, a lot of what they do is listen to each other. We would have, for example, what we call a fishbowl, where one side, we use the terms red and blue, red meaning conservative, blue meaning liberal. Those are the terms. And so the red group might sit together and they would answer the question, why do you think your policies and values are good for the country? And they would just talk about that as a group for 20 minutes, while the blue group simply listened on the outside. Then you switch roles, and the blue group says, they discuss the question, why do you think your policies and values are good for the country? The red group listens, and then together you talk about what you learned about the other side by listening to them actually talk. So then they talk together. And what happens is this amazing thing where people begin to learn about all kinds of things about each other that they didn't realize. One thing they learn is that there's a lot of complexity in the other side. People tend to think that their own side is disorganized and not unified, whereas the people on the other side of the political spectrum all think the same thing and are highly organized. Everybody thinks that. But through actually in conversation, people learn that that's actually not true. Another thing they learn is that your political view doesn't always reflect the value that I think it reflects. So, for example, let's take the question of the wall, building the wall on the southern border. If you say, I support the wall, and I believe that people who support the wall don't care about the well-being of immigrants and refugees, that they're indifferent to, they don't care about them. So therefore, that's why when they say, I support the wall, it means that they don't care about people that unlike them. That's not always the case. You may have your own reasons for supporting the wall that don't have anything to do with you hating other people. Issue after issue after issue, we learn that you can't make an assumption about the underlying value on the basis of what that somebody says about a value position. If you say, I support universal health care, I might say, well, if he supports universal health care, he just believes in high taxes and government-run things that we know don't work well. So that's what you like. You like those things. Well, it's not necessarily true that that's your value. Maybe you have a different set of values. So we make this distinction between, we try to help people understand the difference between listening to a policy idea and then seeing what the underlying values are. I'll give you one more quick example. Sorry, I lost it. It'll come back to me in a minute. So the one key thing is we're dealing with people's feelings more than the policy disagreements. Another principle is what we call red-blue equality. A lot of dialogue efforts don't really bring two sides together on equal terms. It's more of an effort at converting people that don't agree with the view. It's more, it's funded and organized by one group, and they invite some others to come in, and they call that a dialogue, but it's really kind of an outreach program to bring others around to your way of thinking. And people don't like that. People on the other side who find themselves in that position don't like it, and they tend to resent the whole idea of dialogue for that reason. We're very, very explicit at the level of the funding of our program, at the level of the leadership of the program, at the level of the employees of the program, at the level of who organizes the events, down to the number of participants who come on both sides, 50-50. So if you're a conservative, you're going to see plenty of people who think like you at every level of this initiative. If you're a liberal, you're going to see plenty of people who think like you do at every level. So there's a security in knowing that power and the presence is equal on both sides. The other thing I'll say is that the third sort of foundational issue, so one is that we deal with affective polarization. Two is we have red-blue equality. The third is that we're a volunteer movement. I earn a salary, I'm very happy I do, from my work in this. And a small number of other people are paid by the nonprofit entity called Braver Angels. But the vast amount of work all over the country is done by volunteers who just give of themselves 5, 10, 15, 20 hours a week, some more than that, because they care about this. They want to make a contribution to the society. This is a way they can contribute. We have many people, for example, who've recently retired, very prominent careers. They are very capable people. They now want to give something back, and they do through Braver Angels. We have at-home parents who spend a lot of time with their children. They have some hours a week they want to give. They give it through Braver Angels. So we are not going to change the country through paid people doing things. The only way to really change a society is through a mass, a very large number of people just stepping forward to do the work. And we are finding this to be true in this case. There are a lot of people who are very heartsick about the state of our country now, who are frightened that our long experiment in ordered liberty could be threatened. It may come to an end if we continue down this path. And so they want to be involved. Let me, Imre, just take a very few more minutes to finally talk about two key challenges that we're facing. So I mentioned sort of our founding, and I mentioned three of our key principles, the not trying to change minds about positions, but trying to change minds about common humanity, red-blue equality, and the voluntarism of it. Now, let me just conclude by mentioning two questions that we are facing as an organization and as the president of the organization. I think about every day. One question is anyone excluded? Are there some people whose views are so crazy, are so extreme, are so distasteful, or so offensive that we don't want them to be a part of what we do? And the answer to that question is no. Well, no. We don't have a test that you can't be crazy, or you can't be extreme, or you can't say things that are upsetting to others. So we do not exclude people on that. Now, we do expect our participants to follow certain ground rules, which is you don't abuse other people personally, you don't, you listen as well as speak, you follow certain rules of civility that show that you're in good faith about hearing people and treating them with respect. But we do not screen people on the basis of their views. And many dialogue organizations in the United States today have chosen a different path from ours. And they have reasons for this, which are sometimes, I have some respect for those reasons. But they have said, well, if a progressive would say, well, if you really believe, or if you're going to stand up there and tell me that the election was stolen from Trump, that massive voter fraud kept Trump from assuming his proper place as president, that's nothing but a lie from top to bottom. And I don't want to talk to you. I have nothing to say to you. Or if you're a conservative and you say, if you support cancel culture, firing people from their jobs, for a professor from their job for saying the wrong thing in a classroom, if you believe that, I don't even want to talk to you. You're against the Constitution. You're against freedom. I have nothing to say to you. And so a lot of people end up wanting to sort of bring together the center left and the center right. They want to bring together the sort of 60% of the 70% of the sort of I don't know what you would call the sort of middle sectors of society, and that's the dialogue. We don't do it that way, and the reason we don't do it that way is that this country could face a serious crisis to its existence. I believe the stakes are very high here. It's not guaranteed that free society continues indefinitely. It's not guaranteed. What we have in the United States could come to an end. And if it does come to an end, it will be because the people on both sides who have this hardness, this anger, feel excluded and are not part of things, and they become eventually violent. And so not only do we not exclude those people, they're the exact people we want to involve in our work. We want them to come. And just because the one side or another thinks that the other side is too stupid or too evil or too misguided or whatever it is, we don't let that stop us from pursuing our mission of bringing together everyone, regardless of their views, who will agree to act with common decency toward one another, which means taking turns, no personal attacks, don't call people names, listen as well as speak, and so forth. Things we all learned when we were children. Those are the only ground rules we have. But the tendency in society now, I think, is to go in the other direction, to pull in the welcome mats, to say, no, we'll talk to a lot of people, but not these people. I think that's the tendency in society, and we're choosing a different way, and so it makes us a little bit unusual, I think. And in my role in the organization, I try to be the protector of that principle because it's constantly being challenged. We lose men every time we do something. Some people quit the organization because how could you possibly give a platform to that kook? So it requires a kind of constant sense of vigilance to protect that cultural value, that we all have blind spots and no one is not worth talking to. That's our idea. The second question, and I'll stop on this point. The second question is, can there be a social movement to actually make a change in society? I mentioned that Braver Angels is growing. We are a meaningful organization. We get lots of press coverage. We're succeeding by most measurements. But meanwhile, things in the country continue to deteriorate. Things are worse now than when we started. Every month you think, well, could this get worse? Could people, how far down does the elevator go before it just won't go, it won't get any worse? And we haven't discovered that because it just keeps getting worse. All of the measurements suggest that the level of animosity, the level of mistrust, the abusive, the idea of abusing your enemies personally, tuning into media programs that specialize in demonizing other people, the coarseness of our public language, the people in public life say abusive things about other people that they never would have dreamed of saying even 5 years ago. It would have been completely beyond the pale, even 5 or 10 years ago, to say things that you are commonly hear today about how horrible and despicable our enemies are. I'm not trying to pick on any one party or one person, but there was I don't know if you saw this recently in the news, a guy who's running for governor in one of the states in Alabama, my home territory. I was born in Mississippi, but Alabama's right next door. This guy was a famous football coach, very successful football coach. Everybody likes the guy. And he's running for governor of Alabama. He's a Republican. And he gave a speech that said, it's not really that Democrats tolerate crime. It's not really that they don't have a solution to crime. They want crime. They like crime. They welcome crime because they hate America and hate our values. And so they want a lot of criminal behavior. And he said, now some people talk about reparations for African Americans because of past wrongs done to them. And the reason Democrats support reparations is they want the people committing the crimes to get paid for committing the crimes. That was his statement. And I don't know how you feel about that statement. I don't think anyone who has access to a public microphone would have said anything remotely like that, even 5 years ago. That's a level of abuse and a level of, it's hard to know where to begin to try to unpack that statement. But it was so, I think it reached a new level of, how could you imagine a worse thing to say about your fellow citizens, that they want crime and they want Black people to get more money because those are the people committing the crime and we want to pay the criminals. And that's why you should not vote for my opponent. It's just beyond the pale. Now, I could pick an example of a liberal politician who says similar things, but I'm not trying to pick on one side, but it was in the news, I think 2 or 3 days ago. So the country continues to deteriorate. And can we muster enough of a social movement to turn that around? I don't know. I hope the answer is yes. One of the things we're doing now as an organization, here I really am going to stop. We're reaching out not only to individuals, but to organizations around the country to form a partners network of hundreds of organizations from all political angles who would like to communicate with one another and find ways to work together to reduce the rancor in our political life. So if any of your listeners are viewers are, well, certainly welcome anybody who's interested to go to our website at Braver Angels and become a member. braverangels.org. You can join in 2 minutes for $12. It's really easy. But also, Imre, I know we've spoken about the various organizations around the country would like to be a part of this. We would like to convene a large group of organizations together who would like to do this. And so I think I'll certainly be drawing upon some of your wisdom to see what some of those organizations might be. And so, because no one organization can make the kind of change that's necessary, it's going to take a lot of people. So I think I'll stop there. And see if there are questions or comments, and also thank you for giving me the time to say a bit about Braver Angels.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. That was very enlightening, as well as very motivating that we have such an organization, particularly in the current climate, the ongoing climate, as you suggested, the worsening climate. Sadly, we are here. It is what it is. We can look back and theorize about ways to prevent or how it should not have happened. I guess one way is another argument is how do you prevent something like this going forward? But that, not too sure that's something you look at, but more so how we slow this hatred down and bring people together.
Right.
And the fact that you said volunteering, that's a strong base, 11,000 people, considering how young the organization is, and you encourage that with dues that are quite small at $12. So I cannot but recommend people to play a part as someone who stands bipartisan publicly. Of course, I'm a voting person, but I think it's important in certain positions. But that's important, and that issue of dialogue, of course, resonates with me. You know, yours is on the political line, ours is along cultural, faith, race,
Right.
spheres, if you will. But the issues and the problems,
There's a lot of
and the
similarities.
preconceptions,
Yeah.
of course, it's just a different sphere, and you can
Right. Yes.
you can replicate that across different lines of hate and mistrust. You know,
Yes.
these two or
Yes.
three dimensions we're talking about, but it's the human condition that repels us from the other.
Yes,
It
it
is what
is. Yes,
I
it is.
suspect makes us human. If you are someone who believes in the biblical text, we know hatred started very early. We know the story of Adam,
Yes.
of Cain and Abel, I should say, and henceforth, I suspect we've inherited that, for better or worse, and within the framework of trials that we as individuals, as communities, and as a shared humanity, we've gone through 2 world wars, and God forbid we won't have a third, but we know of localized issues. So a lot of this stems from our misunderstanding and mischaracterization of the other. So thank you. That's a long-winded sentence, but I did want to preclude my thanks with that. We're in somewhat the same business, if you will, or the same effort to bring people together and really.
Yeah, how come we haven't cleaned this
first step-
situation up yet? You know, for us, the worse things get, the more work we have to do. So maybe that's,
Yeah,
but it'll be good when we put ourselves out of business, right?
that's the issue. That's what I also tell people. You know, organizations like ours
Yeah.
should not exist. Ideally, we should all be playing golf or fishing or doing something else in our spare time, or
Right.
volunteering for other good causes. There's a lot of
Yes.
problems. Let's take care of this one, and let's work on the environment or children's issues or women's issues. And there's many
Right.
good people doing that, of course, but let's get rid of this one that you and I are passionate about bringing together people and overcoming the concept of the other. Having said that, let me ask a question. Have you seen any or heard of from your circles? And you mentioned, how many chapters did you say you had?
I think we have currently 87.
Okay, that's a phenomenal number, with more than 11,000 people involved, volunteers,
Yes.
people that believe wholeheartedly in mission. I think that's
Yes. Yes.
that's an indication of what that means and how much people value that. But are there any feel-good stories about people that have come in with X level of hate and been able to tone that down and increase their respect for that other, whether it be on the left or the right? What are some of the feel-good stories you've heard from these 80-odd chapters?
Yeah, we call them Braver Angel stories. I mean, they're very common. We had a workshop where a guy a very conservative Christian guy, said some things about Muslims that were, I don't know. The Muslim guy, sitting next to him, did not think they were good things to say, and basically that Muslims all supported terrorism and didn't. He said some things that were hard things to say, and the guy sitting next to him said that, and they got involved in a strong discussion, and they, over the course of the time, they talked a lot, and at the end of the workshop, they said that the Christian guy had agreed to go to Kuyar's mosque, and Kuyar had agreed to go to this guy's church, which they did. And there was a story about it in the local paper, and they're friends to this day. They're actually quite close friends now. And yeah, that was a pretty good story. And then we had another example of this is we had the guy who was the head of the Young Republicans on campus and the guy who was the head of the Young Democrats on campus went to one of the events we had, and they became friends, and they ended up coming to our first annual convention together. They hitchhiked across the country to come to the convention together, and they were roommates at so there was a in that, yeah, that kind of thing happens a lot where you a third example was a guy who, in a conversation with somebody, she told him that I don't think I really don't think I would want to have a friendship with someone like you, someone who, has your, views, which I consider to be so abhorrent. And to his credit, he kept the conversation going, and they ended up, and they take an hour a month. They live in two different parts of the community. They take an hour a month to get on the phone together and talk to one another. And they still are in different political parties, but she no longer believes that she would never want to be friends with him, because she is friends with him. And yeah, so those are the kind of, this happens. You see this over, I'm sure you see this in your own work too.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why I asked. What
Yeah.
in political,
Yeah.
and the reference point is politics. How well does it happen? And of course,
Right.
there's many people watching that may or may not know, so that's important. And then, and what about in areas where there is a vast majority that's very red or very blue? Are you able to have the minority, political perspective present, or is it too daunting to have dialogues where it's a very small minority of the other, if you will?
It's a little harder, but we have this as a rule. For our workshops, what we call our red-blue workshops, there has to be an equal number. We don't have it. So sometimes it's a little bit harder. But here's another thing, and I bet you've seen this too. Sometimes if you're in the minority, you feel like you a little bit have to kind of hide your, you don't really feel comfortable speaking out. You don't feel, you just feel like, that won't be treated well if you show that you're this different thing. These activities that we do give people an opportunity to really be themselves and to feel that they're going to be treated with respect. So sometimes the people who are in the minority side, they like these things because they get to say what they feel, and they get to show through their behavior and through their statement that they're not horrible people. They're actually just people. And so that can be an attraction for people who find themselves in a small minority.
Okay, thank you for that, David. Now I've got a few other questions, but I'll take some from the audience, and we've had a few questions asked in the chat. So let me read them to you. We've got somebody from Texas asking, why is Abraham Lincoln so important in this work? And his name was mentioned a few times in your synopsis.
Yeah, Abraham Lincoln used the phrase better angels. And I'm a Southerner who's a lifelong student of the Civil War. I've studied it all my life. And Lincoln, in his first inaugural address, about 5 weeks before the Civil War began in 1861, which was the bloodiest war in our history, he said, the chorus of the Union will swell again when we are touched, as surely we will be, by the better angels of our nature. Now, what that signifies to us, and why we chose the concept of, we say braver angels now, it's a long story, but we were originally called better angels, and we took it from that speech. And what was so wonderful about it is that he didn't call upon an external source. He didn't call upon the guardian angel. The original draft of the speech, written by his Secretary of State, called upon the guardian angel to look down and help the nation. Lincoln said, there's something within us that makes this possible, makes this change possible. Something better within us, both North and South. And so it just seemed like a very beautiful idea. It seemed like a bringing our best selves to the task we face seemed very inspiring to us. And I've spent, if you saw my bookshelves here, you would see 50 books on Abraham Lincoln. So part of it's a passion of mine that I've shared with some of the others, but part of it is that notion of, well, I don't want to give a long speech about Abraham Lincoln, but he has many of the qualities of never demonizing his opponents. Lincoln said, if you would change a man's mind, you must first convince him that you are his sincere friend. That's really interesting, isn't it? The friendship comes first, has to be, you have to believe that I wish you well, sincerely. That's the only basis upon which I'm going to ever influence you to change your mind about anything. Otherwise, I'm just yelling at you. I'm just hectoring you, right? I'm just telling you, why don't you understand, blah, blah, blah. That never works. The only way that works is this other. So that's a long-winded answer. But yeah, Lincoln was that speech, the first inaugural address. Any of your listeners who have not read that inaugural address, either the first one, then also the second one, read those two addresses, and you will see probably two of the most important political statements ever uttered by an American president. And I'll just say to my friend in Texas, we're not trying to, and I'm a Southerner, I'm a fellow Southerner. This is no disrespect to the South or we're not trying to take a sectional view on this.
Thank you, David. We have a question now from California, and it reads, let me get that. So this is a psychosocial problem rather than a political problem.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. And that's why we we don't focus on arguing about political issues. I use the term affective, but I could have almost as easily used the term psychosocial. So I think your questioner makes a really important point.
And one thing that comes to mind now regarding Lincoln, and I'm new to America and a new American, and of course I have Australian friends that ask me, and I say, of course, it's a very limited understanding of Lincoln, is that he went to war. He took his own nation to war to protect their rights and to free and to enable African Americans, and that, if I don't know if it's appropriate for me to make this statement, but if there's one thing you need to understand about Lincoln, it's that, particularly as an outsider, as non-Americans, I think that's a huge deal. And you may want to comment on that.
Yeah, well, it's true, and he gave his life for this cause. He was killed. He was assassinated in 1865, shortly after the conclusion of the war. So it's not like he didn't take his principles seriously. At the same time, he never demonized. He never said bad things about Southern people. His wife was a Southern person. He was born in Indiana. He grew up in Indiana and Kentucky, so border states. What I really like about Lincoln is that he had a few firm principles that he stuck with his entire life. And one of them was that he was horrified by the institution of slavery. And he ended up dying over that one. At the same time, he never hated other people. He just didn't. And he did that at a time when hating other people was very common in the United States, on in both North and South. So my admiration for him continues to grow. The more I study about him in this period, I would say his example is something that I really aspire to emulate.
Well, on that note, David, let me
I lost the audio there. Here we go.
Yes, my apologies. I was
Okay.
muted there. On that note,
Yeah.
let me thank you and thank everyone that's joined us, including those that have engaged through questions. Remember, David's book is in the description below in the YouTube channel that you're watching now. So hit the Amazon link to find the details. And similarly important, beyond the story, of course, of Brave Angels is hopefully, and I, of course, concur with David. We're in a similar field, but in different spheres, if you will. By all means, support David's mission. It's a very nominal fee to be involved, and by all means, braveangels.org. So please.
I'm also I'm very happy to be a part of this, Emre, and I do feel that we're working. Our two organizations are in guided by a certain star, and so I'm honored to be with you, and honored to share in the mission, the shared mission.
Exactly. The same types of othering exists, so it's a similar, shall I say, a social disease when we look down upon people, when we have preconceptions. And it's that first step that's the hardest. When you get people around the table, everything melts away for the vast majority of the people. So I cannot not encourage people to play a part. Of course, Peace Island is here by all means, but we all have differing tastes. So those that want to be involved in helping the overcoming of misunderstanding, of mistrust, of hate, as sad as it is, it exists. And please support David and Brave Angels. Again, braveangels.org. I've mentioned the book. So thank you again, David. And for our audience, if you're here for the first time, please like this video, subscribe to the channel. This is the new virtual thing to do. Of course, we need to encourage so that this, not only this video, but the broader spectrum of videos that we provide play a positive part in YouTube's algorithm. So no doubt, as you watch YouTube, you always hear people, and we're one of them. Hit the like and the subscribe, and we look forward to hosting you during our next event on a future video. And David, thank you, and good luck in your mission of bringing people together.
Right back at you. Best of luck to you. Thank you again. Really enjoyed our time together tonight.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we're off live.